Secular Fam, and happy Friday. I hope that everyone had a fantastic week and has a fantastic weekend ahead of them. We have a few events coming up, including our Festival of Pies on December 27th and our Secular Summit on January 10th. Both are going to be hosted by the lovely folks at the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix. The Festival of Pies is our way of getting together with a bunch of godless heathens and, just celebrating each other and enjoying some carbs, lots and lots of carbs. And then, of course, the Secular Summit is our way to set the tone for 2026. And this year, our theme is mutual aid. So we'll be highlighting some of the organizations and individuals who are leading the charge to help our most vulnerable neighbors. Next week, we will be speaking with Rich, and I hope I'm saying his name right, Logis, Logis, founder of the Leaving MAGA nonprofit. He's going to talk about his journey away from the MAGA movement, so you definitely do not want to miss that. But for today, we are speaking with Ashley Chambers, the executive director of Arizona Families for Vaccines. Arizona Families for Vaccines, a state chapter of American Families for Vaccines. Arizona Families for Vaccines is a nonprofit that works at the grassroots level to promote pro-vaccine policy that is based on science. Whew, you guys must have been busy for the last few years with all the anti-vax bills going through. They vehemently oppose any vaccine policy that is based on misinformation or that puts Arizona's most vulnerables at risk. Well, you must be busier than you've ever been in your entire career.
Yes, that's for sure.
Is there anything that I missed or that you'd like to highlight about your bio? Because I'm sure you're going to talk about it, but I mostly want to know how you landed here. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a little bit about myself is I was a practicing criminal defense attorney in Arizona, and then I got into the policy world in the criminal defense realm, working at the nonprofit that represents all the criminal defense attorneys in Arizona. And we worked with policy and lawmakers. And then about 2 years ago, I heard that this national nonprofit wanted to open up a state chapter of Arizona Families for Vaccines. And so I jumped ship and I had been sort of wanting to reach out a little bit more and do something different. So I have three kids also. So this is children's health, and children's health issues is something that personally affects me. So I have been doing it for about 2 years now. It's certainly been a timely and challenging job, but it allows me to partner with great organizations who have the same fervor and fighting spirit that I do. And so it's been a fun ride. So I'm really happy to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are happy that you're here. And today, especially with the news that we all heard this morning, I feel like your talk is going to be even more relevant. So, folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And with that, I'm going to let you take it away, Ashley.
Okay, that is great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see. Good to go?
Yep, you're good. Hmm.
Well, we already had a great intro about what Arizona Families for Vaccines is. You guys know a little bit about it, but just breaking it down, what we as individuals are and what we are not. So, everybody who is a volunteer for Arizona Families for Vaccines, we are pro-business, we are pro-science, we are pro-scientific advancement, we are pro-academia, pro-healthy kids, pro-medicine. We are just pro grounding our policy in science and in reality. We are not pharmaceuticals. We are not mandate pushers. We are not anti-children's health. And we are not people who don't believe in reality. The majority of our people have zero political experience, but they are college students, grandparents, um, and people who really care about public policy in Arizona. And a lot of them have come from a time when they have seen diseases ravish their friends, their family members, and they don't want that to happen to the next generation of kiddos. So that's who we are, and that's what we stand for. We are part of this national group called American Families for Vaccines. We were formerly known as Safe Communities Coalition. So we are a national nonprofit, and this is our state chapter. So you can see all of the different chapters that we have. This coming year, we are moving into North Dakota, Wisconsin, and also Florida. So if you know of anybody in those states, please feel free to send them our information. We are always recruiting more advocates. So we are a very much growing organization. And if you know of anybody who might be interested in working for a chapter in their state, let us know. So just to put the problem of anti-vaccine misinformation into perspective for you guys, every single state in the United States has at least one state chapter of a anti-vaccine organization. And this is not a unsophisticated network of people. They are very sophisticated and they have great fundraising abilities. They raised over $63 million in 2023 alone. So when you talk about the money in politics, anti-vaccine organizations are very much a power player when it comes to policy. They are very in touch with their lawmakers. They are very grassrootsy and they are very vocal. So that's a little bit of the problem, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that it is a big, big problem. What we do in our Families for Vaccines chapters, we are very state focused, meaning what I do in Arizona is very different than what my colleagues do in Maine. We are very responsive to our population. We are very responsive to our political landscape. So when I say I'm going to do what I'm going to do in Arizona, that's what I mean. So we are very effective in that we are very responsive to what we know will work in our state and what we know won't work in my state. So there's no one size fits all. So, which is good. I think a lot of national nonprofits sometimes miss the mark in terms of figuring out what policies are going to work for their state. So today's roadmap, and again, we'll have plenty of time for questions. I know I'm not going to get through all of it, but I'll try and just give you guys like a foundation of understanding the anti-vaccine problem. I'm going to talk about ACIP, federal vaccine coverage, and the vaccine injury compensation program. If you guys ever follow anti-vaxxers on like Twitter or X or anything, they're going to talk about the vaccine injury compensation program a lot. We'll talk about state policy from last year in Arizona, and then what we might have coming in 2026. Very fun. Okay, so ACIP. ACIP is actually meeting today and yesterday. They meet a couple times a year. It's a federal advisory committee housed within the CDC. Typically, it's composed of 15 voting members, scientists, clinicians, public health experts, people that have been in this industry for many years and understand the way that clinical trials work, understand evidence and data and what trends are. They review the scientific data and they develop vaccine recommendations. The goal is to make sure that vaccine policy is consistent across all of the states. So that way, if you're a kiddo in Maine, you're going to get the same set of immunizations that a kiddo in California is going to get. So that way, when you're moving states, you don't have to call your Pete up and say, hey, my kid is 6 years old. And in California, they require X, Y, and Z. Can you tell me? Can you tell me what my kid has had? You know, because you can look up on the CDC website, my kid is 6 years old, and these are the vaccines that my kid has had. It's a way to keep our population healthy. It's a way to keep us organized. It's a way to help parents and help clinicians provide the best and appropriate care based on data. Super important. The nitty-gritty of what ACIP actually is supposed to do, and I say supposed to because we've had a lot of changes. They look at vaccine safety, efficacy, cost effectiveness of treating vaccines or of treating disease before you acquire a disease, feasibility of being able to vaccinate for a certain disease, and then equity. So making sure that rural populations get the same quality of care that urban populations do. The recommendations that come out of this ACIP panel get voted on and approved by the CDC director. Then they get published in the MMRW, which is the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. It's like a booklet that all clinicians can look at and be like, oh, this is what the CD says about it. It's our official immunization policy. Um, One thing people don't know is that ACIP's recommendations have a big impact beyond just what the federal government says that we should do. It actually shapes clinical practice for lots of different things. It is the standard of care for malpractice. Basically, you shouldn't be sued for malpractice if you're following what the federal government has said based off of decades of research and studies that show that this is what is appropriate care. So it's a way for physicians to be confident in what they're recommending. Um, it actually governs a lot of states' school entry laws. So a lot of states, they sometimes will match their school entry requirements saying, hey, we want you to get vaccinated for these diseases that ACIP recommends because we know it's what's healthy for the population. In Arizona, it shapes our clinical practice, meaning pharmacists can only vaccinate for vaccines that are ACIP recommended. So if a vaccine gets pulled from the schedule, meaning ACIP says, we don't like this vaccine, we think it shouldn't be recommended, your pharmacist can no longer vaccinate for it. So if you guys remember a couple months ago, when people were trying in Arizona trying to go get a COVID vaccine and they weren't able to get one without a prescription from their doctor, that was the problem. Since then, it's been fixed. Governor Hobbs put an executive order in that basically was a standing order that said, if you want to be able to get a COVID vaccine, you can just walk into your pharmacy. It's a standing prescription order from DHS. So when we talk about, well, that's just federal policy. It doesn't really have an impact on what vaccines I can personally get. It really does because we saw the repercussions of an ACIP change already. Here's a big one. ACIP affects insurance coverage. When a vaccine is ACIP recommended, it triggers mandatory insurance coverage under the ACA. So under Obamacare, ACA. All recommended ACIP vaccines must be covered by private insurance and Medicaid expansion programs. It also is required to be included in the Vaccines for Children program. The Vaccines for Children's program is how you get free vaccines for all kiddos 19 and under. Underinsured, Medicaid eligible, Medicaid enrolled, underinsured, you get free vaccines if they are recommended by ACIP. So again, if we're talking about how federal policy will impact you, this is another way. ACIP decides to remove a vaccine from recommendation, it will no longer be required to be free. One important thing to note is in Arizona, we devote no dollars towards free vaccines, meaning our Vaccines for Children program is completely federally funded. So hypothetically, if ACIP were to remove a vaccine from the schedule, Arizona would have to somehow scrounge up within our very tight budget, as many of you know, in order to pay for that for kiddos. And your guess is as good as mine whether we would be able to find the money for that. The elephant in the room, the vaccine injury compensation program. If you follow anti-vaxxers, you will hear about this. Basically, what the vaccine injury compensation program is, it's a no-fault alternative to traditional legal claims for vaccine injury. When I first started talking, I told you guys that we were grounded in reality, meaning we know that vaccine injuries happen. Are they extremely rare? Yes, they are extremely rare. Compensatable injuries for vaccines occur about 1 in every 1 million dose given. So they are very rare. And this is the program that you are required to go through first to get your claim adjudicated. It's with the Court of Federal Claims. It's the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Was established in 1986 by Congress, and it's administered by the federal government. HRSA is the department. When you claim a vaccine injury, you are not suing the manufacturer when you participate in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. You are actually suing HHS, and HHS is working out the settlement with you if they think that your claim is compensatable by a very specific, detailed set of criteria. The reason that this program was established by Congress is because it ensures a stable vaccine supply. What was happening prior to 1986 is when you think about how many kiddos get vaccinated every day, and then move on with your life. 5 days from now, your kid could have a brain aneurysm suddenly, right? And if you add up all those kids together, the correlation between an injury and in any given kid getting a vaccine, there will be some correlation, just temporally, by the vast number of kiddos getting vaccines. If every parent who got their kid a vaccine within 6 months had something bad happen to their kid, like a heart defect or a brain injury, and they're looking for some reason, and there's nothing out there but a vaccine, and then you file suit, that's how you bankrupt vaccine manufacturers. So the purpose of the program is twofold. It's one, it's to make sure that true vaccine injury claims are compensated and they're compensated fairly. And it's also protect the vaccine supply chain from bogus lawsuits. When you think about every vaccine manufacturer having to defend every single claim, because any person can walk into court and file a lawsuit. Any person can do that. And then that requires the manufacturers to retain counsel and to come in and fight it and spend money. Could bankrupt the system, and it was bankrupting the system. One more thing about that, it is when you hear lawmakers or policymakers or even individuals in your life saying there's no way to hold vaccine makers accountable, it's not true. You have to go through the VICP program first, and then if you don't like the result, then you can file a claim in court. So you can, and if you don't like what VICP has done, then you can file your claim in court. So it's just not true that you can't sue a vaccine manufacturer, because you can. Additionally, VICP makes it easy for you. They pay for your lawyer throughout the whole process. They pay for your lawyer to adjudicate your claims. So they are making it accessible for people, even people who wouldn't be able to pay for a lawsuit. You're able to participate in the program because they will pay for your attorneys. How does what we just talked about, the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, relate to ACIP? Vaccines covered in the VIC program are those recommended by ACIP for women who are pregnant and children. Once ACIP recommends a vaccine, then HHS can add it to the program. Again, if you're taking a vaccine out of the schedule, you can also, I mean, presumably, this is uncharted waters we're dealing with here, but presumably it could fall outside of the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, and then those vaccine manufacturers could be hauled into court anytime that a parent wants to blame a vaccine injury on or anytime a parent wants to blame something wrong with their kiddo on a vaccine. Again, I'm not saying that vaccine reactions don't occur. I am saying they are very rare. And the program is funded by a tax on vaccines. So that's how the program is funded. So RFK has dismissed all the previous ACIP members and replaced them almost overwhelmingly with anti-vaccine activists. He laid off a ton of CDC workers, including career CDC workers who have dedicated their lives to the scientific research and study of these diseases. So when we're talking about a brain drain, this is a brain drain. It's pretty devastating in terms of scientific research. And CDC and HHS is no longer trustworthy. You can't trust what the policy they're coming out with because they've gotten rid of a lot of the people. And we see memos coming out that basically says, this is our policy. If you disagree with it, give me your resignation, which is not the way that science works. It's about testing theories and having the humility to say, here's my theory, let's test it out. And that's not what's happening anymore. Previously, they already removed the MMRV from recommendations for 12-month-old kiddos. It's still okay for older kids, but they already removed it. They most recently claimed that 10 kids died from the COVID vaccine. People are saying release the data, release the evidence for this. They have not, and there's no timeline on when they will. So when we talk about RFK's promise of radical transparency, where is the radical transparency there? I don't see it. So actually, as of this morning, the Hep B birth dose, which was on the chopping block, now they removed sort of the recommendation for the Hep B birth dose and sort of insinuated within their vote today that kiddos who don't have a positive mother for Hep B should wait until 2 months to get their first dose of Hep B. Everybody who was calling in said, where's the data to support giving a dose at 2 months? There was no data presented that showed that 2 months was an appropriate time to start the Hep B series. There was also a vote this morning too on saying that so Hep B is in a 3 series. Hep B, for those of you that don't know, is a disease that if you catch it, it leads to liver cancer, liver cirrhosis, and liver failure. So very serious. It's a bloodborne saliva pathogen. It can live up on surfaces for a week. So very dangerous. There's a big misconception is that the only way you can get it is from sex or IV drug use. That's what anti-vaxxers will say, and they'll say newborns don't participate in any of that, so they shouldn't be vaccinated for it. It's not true. It's a bloodborne pathogen, saliva pathogen, and a significant number of people who have Hep B do not know they have Hep B, so can transmit it unwittingly to other people. So pretty scary stuff that's coming out of the CDC. They weren't able to, about the vote today. They said, do the first one around 2 months, and then you should test for antibodies to see if you should do a second or a third dose. There's no data that supports not continuing the series. So basically what you're doing is you are asking pediatricians to administer a blood test to an infant to see whether they have the protective antibodies for Hep B without any studies suggesting that you shouldn't do a second or a third dose, and assuming that if they show antibodies at that young age, that without that second or third dose, that it will confer lifelong immunity. There are no studies that show that, and it's super dangerous. So this is just sort of the anti-science nonsense that we're dealing with. Okay, one more topic here, and then I'll transition and see if you guys have any questions related to any of this stuff. There is a table in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program of injuries that HHS assumes were caused by the vaccine. So basically, hypothetically, I don't remember the exact numerology behind it, but there is like a shoulder injury that if you have like a sore shoulder and you can't work for however long, and you claim this injury within X amount of days after you got a vaccine, pursuant to the table, it's presumed that that injury was caused by the vaccine, and then compensation comes. The big concern is that HHS will add autism to this compensatable injury program because we know HHS does not care about scientific data. There is no scientific data, despite all the studies that have demonstrated that vaccines cause autism. Um, if HHS were to add autism as a compensatable injury on this table, it would completely bankrupt the vaccine injury compensation program. Small vaccine manufacturers would not be able to pay for legal fees to haul themselves into court to defend themselves. Even large manufacturers would likely withdraw from the US market and take their manufacturing overseas. We'd lose jobs, we'd lose access to vaccines, creating a whole generation of kids until we can hopefully right the ship and get a new administration in HHS to fix it. But imagine the damage to the scientific community, scientific integrity, and to public health and to individual health. So really dangerous. We know RFK loves saying there's no vaccine that's safe and effective. They love correlating autism with vaccines, despite there being absolutely no evidence and studies to the contrary. So that was all very fun. I'm sure you guys are feeling very positive about that. I'll take a moment here and see if there's any common questions. Maybe we'll just give it like 4 minutes for questions right here if there are any.
I'm looking here and I'm seeing more comments. Let's see. Not good, could have been worse.
Yeah,
Let's see. Okay, wait
it's
one
gonna
second.
get worse. I mean, we're only not even a year into this current HHS administration, so it's going to get worse.
Mm-hmm. Um, I know that, oh, shoot, I had a question about, oh, you know, I put it in the chat, like, but it really should be that I want to know, are their kids vaccinated? Are they vaccinated? Because I guarantee most of the time that they are. And like, just trying to okay. I mean, it's just a grift, right? Like, oh, there's a group of people who are anti-vax, and we're just going to prey on them. We're going to sell them ivermectin and oregano oil or whatever things they think are going to keep their children safe. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that seems to be the entire reason because somebody can make money off of misinformation. Once again,
Yes.
folks, today's point of the conversation is capitalism is the root of all evil.
Well, I
It
didn't say
seems.
that. I didn't say
No,
that. She said it. Um, but I, I, it's a grift. This is
it's
a
a
grift.
grift, yeah. And they're really preying. They're preying
Yeah.
on people, simply so that they can line their pockets. And it's abhorrent.
Yep.
It's really disgusting. And it's hard for all the rest of us to be watching this crazy and try to make sense of it because there is no sense to it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, because
I
I'm like, is
agree.
it that they want people to suffer? Do they want more sick people? Like, why? But
They want
I
to make
don't,
money. They want to
yeah.
make money. Anti-vaccine nonprofits pay their executives handsomely. And there's a bunch of lawyers, one of them testifying today, Aaron Siri, makes a lot of money off of, despite him saying that vaccine manufacturers cannot be sued, he sues them. So, it's a grift. I agree. So let's go to states. Are states doing any better? No.
Wait, real
They're
quick. Now there is a
yes.
question real quick coming from Reagan and they
Yeah.
ask, Ashley, do you anticipate that parents with newborns will struggle to get the birth dose of HB covered by insurance?
I we don't know yet. It's too soon to tell. Let me say this. Um, Commercial insurance likes vaccines because it prevents sickness. So am I confident that given all the changes that happen every single day, am I confident that insurance companies, and again, this is all new charter territory. So by law, they should cover them. Can I guarantee that 100%? No, but by law, they should cover them. But it is my thought that once the dust settles a little bit, they will still continue to be covered. Either one, because they're required to by law, or two, because they know it prevents expensive disease, you
Hmm.
know?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
as much as everybody hates insurance companies, at the end, insurance companies are concerned about their bottom line. So if insurance companies are saying we're still going to cover something, it's because we know it prevents diseases, you know?
Yeah.
So I like to
Hmm.
say that a lot, but that's
Yeah.
a great question. So if you're pregnant right now, I wouldn't have concern about it. Okay, states are not doing better. Um, Depends on your state, but I'm just going to talk about like our state and purple to red states right now. Blue states are doing things proactively. They are trying to reinforce strong policy. We do not live in one of those states. Um, so you can see um, when all this started, not shockingly, after COVID, started to go down a little bit. And now 2025, we're right back up there, not coincidentally with the rise of RFK and HHS.
Mm.
So we can break down a lot of these bills into specific categories. There's a very specific organization called ICANN. It's an anti-vaccine organization, and they do model bills for state lawmakers. A lot of state lawmakers will take bills that they propose and put them into place. And these are some of the groups that they fall in. We'll talk about them more. But I want to talk about Arizona. So Arizona, it's anti-vaccine legislation is not new in Arizona. We have been one of the states in the previous years, even before it was like sexy to be an anti-vaccine activist. We have been a state that has consistently had anti-vaccine legislation introduced, and in some years past. Um, but we have seen a shift politically where it has now become not sort of this like weird fringe issue where Republicans and Democrats both looked at anti-vaccine lawmakers putting forth these bills and just being like, oof, that person's cuckoo. You know, they don't know what they're talking about. There's no data to support what they're saying. And now they're voting for it. They're legitimizing it because they think that their base supports them. And we have seen a growing trend of politicization of vaccines where, um, I was talking about this earlier in a conversation, but basically, anti-vaccine activists used to be these crunchy granola moms living off the grid, farm to table. I only feed my kiddo, tomatoes that I grew in my backyard. Um, but now it's interesting because those people and the people on the far right have now sort of like they don't agree on anything, but they agree on vaccines being bad. When they have different reasons why they're bad, these people might say, like, we don't know the ingredients, I only feed my kids natural, I breastfeed until they're 5 years old, all these things. And these people on the right would be like, it's a conspiracy. Um, the government is out to get us. The government just wants to control us. So they don't agree on anything, but they agree on this. And it's just an interesting political environment when it comes to vaccines right now. But let's talk about what we saw in Arizona. Last year, just 2025, was not good. So for those of us who live here, I'm assuming most of you do, but
Yeah.
so the way it works is that when you want to send your kid to daycare or to school, there is a list of required vaccines. All of those are the ACIP recommendations. Not every ACIP recommended vaccine is included in the requirements to go to daycare or school here, just some of them. But if you don't want to if you don't want to get your kid vaccinated, nobody's going to force you. If they are in daycare or preschool, you sign a personal belief exemption form and turn it in. It basically says, or if they're in preschool daycare, it's a religious belief. It says it's against my religious belief to vaccinate my kiddo. Turn it in, end of story. If your kid's in elementary school, K through 12, you sign a personal belief exemption. It says it's against my personal belief to vaccinate my kid. That's it. So really easy. A lot of people who move here to this state are like, what? I can't believe that. That's so insane. But it is what it is. So this bill, so already with that as the baseline, nobody is being forced to vaccinate their kids to go to school. This bill required every communication from schools to parents about immunizations to include information about the exemptions. What that looks like in practice means the beginning of the year, you're supposed to turn in your immunization forms or an exemption form to the school nurse. School nurse emails me and says, "Hey, Ashley, you didn't turn in your immunization form." I respond back and say, "Oh my gosh, I totally forgot. Hey, my pediatrician is super busy. I can't get in for the next 2 months. Do you know where I could go to get a vaccine?" School nurse replies back and says, "Hey, yeah, you can go to CVS. Also, here's an exemption form." So
Mm,
it's a commercial for an exemption.
mm,
In committee, when we talked about it, the evidence is that exemptions aren't being honored. School nurses are forcing kiddos to get vaccinated. And I said, this might shock some of you that go down to the Capitol or that watch testimony, but a lot of what people say in committee is not true. School nurses have a lot on their plates than forcing kiddos to go and get vaccinated. So it's just not true. And I also said in committee, I said, any parent can Google, "Do I have to get my kid vaccinated to go to school in Arizona?" The first thing that pops up on your Google search is the DHS exemption form. So it is just not true that exemptions are not being honored and that schools are forcing kiddos to get vaccinated. This and a lot of the other bills are just being put forward as informed consent. We're just making sure that parents are informed about their choices. What that really means is that um, you don't think that vaccines are safe, and you just want to make sure that someone is telling parents that vaccines are not safe. That's the code word for that.
I
It's
mean,
just not true.
you can't even give a kid a Tylenol at a public school, or I don't know what other schools are like, but I know that in regular public schools, unless they sign the form, like you can't, nobody's doing this stuff that they say.
They also don't keep vaccines in their schools. Nobody
No, I've
keeps
never,
vaccines in their schools.
yeah,
So
I,
nobody's
yeah.
hiding the information about exemptions. Even if hypothetically there was someone that wanted to hide the information, everybody has the internet. It's just not true. It's not true. So yuck. Don't like that bill. Thumbs down. So this is an interesting one. So when the COVID vaccine was approved, it was approved during the pandemic under emergency use authorization. It's basically an expedited approval process for vaccines because the approval vaccine process from start to finish can sometimes take up to 10 years. Obviously, when we had hundreds of thousands of people dying, we couldn't do that. And when President Trump did Operation Warp Speed, shout out to President Trump for accomplishing that. That was something amazing. And it was a scientific advancement like no other for everybody in the world to come together and create this miraculous vaccine that saved lives. Like we have to give credit where credit is due. And it's an amazing thing that happened. And I think we need to remember that. And I think we can keep reminding people that President Trump supported the COVID vaccine when it came out and encouraged people to get it. I think sometimes people in politics forget. And I think it's important to remind them that this was an initiative that President Trump supported, and it's something they should be reminded of. So this bill, we see this version every time. It is preventing hospitals and employers from requiring EUA approval, from requiring vaccines that have only had EUA approval. So during COVID, a lot of hospitals, when their physicians were getting sick and our ERs were overrun, they said, "Hey, we need you guys to get vaccinated. You have to get vaccinated for COVID because we can't keep our hospitals open unless you do." Um, so imagine, God forbid we're ever in another pandemic again. I think it's probably unlikely. God forbid we ever have another pandemic again. If this policy were in place, hospitals would not be permitted to require their employees to get vaccinated. Pretty dangerous. Another favorite of anti-vaccine activists as foster children. So Arizona DCS, who's the agency that places foster children, um, wants to place babies and toddlers, 5 years age and below, because that's like the real danger period for kiddos in their immune system and coming into contact with vaccine preventable diseases with vaccinated families, because they want to make sure that babies are protected from vaccine preventable diseases. We had lawmakers last year that wanted to prevent DCS's policy of only placing infants and toddlers in vaccinated homes. Super dangerous. So, um, we like to talk about unexpected consequences of policy. And if you think about it, if that baby gets sick in an unvaccinated home that was placed there by the state of Arizona, who do you think bio parents are going to sue? They're going to sue the state of Arizona for child neglect. Who's going to pay with their taxpayer dollars to defend against that lawsuit? The
Mm.
taxpayers, right? It's so when we talk about vaccine policy not having an impact beyond individuals, it's just not true. Another point that we hear a lot in committee is people will say, well, why do you care if anybody else gets vaccinated? And the reason that we care if other people get vaccinated is because there are many people in this country, including kiddos 4 and under, who cannot get vaccinated because they are too young, right? Infants and babies, too young to be completely protected against these diseases. And there are people that are immunocompromised, people going through cancer treatment, people who are with organ transplants. These people are immunosuppressed and they themselves cannot get vaccinated. So if everybody else gets vaccinated, it protects those people who cannot. So yes, it's an individual choice to be vaccinated, but your choices have consequences for everybody else. So we need to make sure that public policy reflects that important information. And right now, these type of bills do not do that. This one, colleges, universities, and technical schools were required to provide exemptions for required vaccines. Right now, the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella, which we're having the second largest measles outbreak in the country in northern Arizona right now. They required that for attendance at ASU, NAU, and U of A. Obviously, they grant medical exemptions, which is for people who cannot take vaccines. And most importantly, the medical school, nursing school, pharmacy, they require additional vaccinations, most of which are just that childhood vaccine schedule. We're not talking about diseases that are not endemic to this country. We're talking about diseases that live and exist in this country and are endemic, I mean they are circulating within the community. They require them because you do rotations in hospitals where there are vulnerable patients. And if you're a medical student and you're not getting vaccinated and you're going into hospital systems and you're exposing patients to diseases, big liability again. So who do you think is going to end up funding this? All of us through our taxpayer dollars. This bill was introduced but did not get assigned to a committee. It prevented medical offices from refusing to accept unvaccinated patients or dismiss patients based on vaccination status. So basically, some pediatrician offices are like, you know what, I can't handle having so many unvaccinated patients in my waiting room when I have newborns here, when I have sick kiddos here. It's a liability for me, it's a liability for my staff. I'm just not going to accept unvaccinated patients anymore. You have to go seek care at FQHCs, which are federally qualified health centers that must, by law, accept unvaccinated patients. So this bill would have prohibited that. Okay, I'll stop right there and see if we have any questions.
Well, there's a few comments here. Let's see. One of my classmates who became a vascular surgeon got hepatitis B after a needle stick that was accidental during care for a trauma patient, and he died of liver cancer 20 years later.
There we go.
Um, like what we're seeing more and more of, right, is that these ghouls on the other side, they seem to enjoy suffering, right? And they don't really understand, well, even the word empathy is now a toxic word, right? So they don't understand until something affects them personally, it seems, unfortunately. But even in the case of, I want to say maybe it was New Mexico, where there was like a JW family that opted not to get their kid vaccinated. And when the journalist asked, would you do it again? He was like, absolutely. So even
Texas.
then, and I just put in the chat here, I had some good friends who live in the DC area, and they had a son a few years ago, and the parents rightfully said, I need you all to be up to date on your shots if you want to visit the grandson. We're really kind of keeping, and it was also very close to like COVID, and of course, and they chose, to be victims and to go off and, rage about their, liberal children, and chose not to see their firstborn grandson. Like it's incredible to me what people will give up simply for their ideology.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not. Let's see. We have friends who are compromised. Let's see. There was a comment here from Diane, the guy who published the BS report in Lancet about measles vaccine causing autism. He had developed
Yeah.
a measles vaccine himself, so he wanted people to stop using the usual vaccine and move to his. It was all about
Yes.
money. Lancet withdrew the article. He was criminally charged and went to prison and lost his medical license. But still, some people want to believe him. And so how do you, I mean, I hope maybe you're going to talk to us a little bit about how we can talk to
Yeah.
those family members or other people who seem to be believing this old debunked study or any other
Yeah.
nonsense that's coming from HHS.
Yeah. So it is a very pervasive problem. I will say, I think that there are different levels of, or I would say different motivations. And I think that's something that I consistently try and keep in mind. The motivations of people who I like to describe it as a pyramid. The motivations of the people who are at the very top of this anti-vaccine policy pyramid, those people are very self-motivated and self-interested. A lot of those people are selling wellness supplements. They are working for law firms that want to sue for vaccine injuries, like Aaron Siri, who testified at ACIP today. Um, or they work at a anti-vaccine nonprofit. You know, RFK Jr. made millions of dollars with anti-vaccine activity. He wrote books. He gets a fee when he refers people to an anti-vaccine law firm. He has a financial stake, which he then later gave to a family member in a lawsuit about the HPV vaccine. So there are those people who are at the top who have a personal vested financial interest, or they just like fame if they don't have a financial interest. They just like fame. So I put those people into one category, and I think that they do disinformation. Then I think, secondly, there is a category of people who maybe are predisposed predisposed to believing conspiracy theories, or maybe not. Maybe they're just regular people, but they have been preyed upon by these people at the top of the pyramid. And, especially new moms, when you have a baby, and I have three children, when you have a baby, this is the most precious thing.
Mhm.
You have worked hard for 9 months, and sometimes people have worked hard for years to have a baby. And you see this precious, pink-faced thing who is dependent on you for everything. Your emotions are so high, and you live and you breathe for this child. And when you see misinformation out there that is scaring you into believing that the risks of vaccinating your child are equivalent to the risks of a disease, you will choose not to vaccinate your child because you're like, you know what? I'm going to take that. If the risks of both are even, I'm going to take the risk and not vaccinate my child because they might never get that disease. But if I give them the vaccine, I know I'm exposing them to, potential harm. And it's just not true.
Mhm.
When our policymakers are saying we're just giving people informed consent, we just want to make sure they know the risks. That's not what they actually mean. Um, well, maybe some do. I have yet to see policymakers who that's what they actually mean. There could be some, and maybe some supporters of those policies actually do feel that way and actually believe that some people potentially are being coerced into taking vaccines. Um, but I think the majority of people, when they say that, they're just trying to do informed consent, or really just trying to present the information in a way that makes it seem like the risks of a vaccine are just as high as the risks of a disease. And that's
Mhm.
really, really dangerous. And we're putting babies and infants, especially, lives at risk. So
Mhm.
that's when you're talking to people, I think that's a really important distinction to make between who is the person and which side of the pyramid do they fall on? Do they fall under the top where they have a motive to do something like this? Or are they really just being taken advantage of? And so I really try and have, and I do have empathy for those people. Um, and I think that's something when you're thinking about conversations to really keep in mind. That being said,
Mhm.
I don't have any empathy for people who are at the top of the pyramid and know what they're doing is wrong and making a profit off of people. That is wrong. And I think that those people should be held accountable to what they're saying.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of what we can do in Arizona here, I will share. Am I still sharing my screen?
No, no, go ahead and feel free
Okay.
to share again. Yeah.
Let me share what this year could bring. So this year, remember that bill that we just saw previously preventing doctor's office from uh, not accepting unvaccinated patients? That bill has already been put in the hopper for this year. So that bill is present. We have that bill again. Obviously not good for our physician members, right? They don't like that. So I mean, there's just like I have so much we could go into. Here's a favorite one. Since we have time, I'll just talk about this. Here's a conspiracy theory bill we've seen in plenty of states. Louisiana loves this bill. Um, it is where is it? Oh, here, vaccinated bloods. So anybody who would go to donate blood would have to report their vaccination status. Donated blood would have to be tested for vaccines. Um, so that's pretty loony, right? There is no test on donated blood to test for vaccines. Um, luckily we haven't seen this in Arizona. Do I think that we could see it someday? Sure. I hope it wouldn't get assigned to a committee, but this is just like the type of misinformation we're dealing with when we talk about anti-vaccines. Um, People love to incite fear about vaccine research, talk about people who are doing vaccine research, taking part in it's illegal to take part in the release of a self-spreading virus or bacteria. I mean, nobody is doing this type of stuff. Informed consent, we're certainly going to see more informed consent bills. Um, Ingredient prohibition, so prohibiting vaccines that contain mercury or aluminum. The overwhelming majority of vaccines on the childhood schedule contain aluminum because aluminum is an adjuvant, which means it is the thing that creates a robust immune response. So if you try and outlaw, and keep in mind, there's data that shows a breastfed infant is exposed to more aluminum than what is in a vaccine. So when we talk about there's no scientific basis, that's what we mean. Okay, what are we doing about it in Arizona? What can you do at home? So first, get in. Like Mean Girl said, we're showing up for vaccines. Regina George didn't say it exactly this way, but maybe she should have. If you scan this QR code, you sign up to get our emails. We do not spam you a lot. It's mostly just during session when we have specific anti-vaccine bills. You can sign up for an RTS account. I'm sure many people on this call are familiar with Request to Speak, but if you're not, it's a way you can sign in if you're a registered voter in Arizona and thumbs up and thumbs down a bill. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. It's very easy. If you don't know about it, please reach out to me. I'm happy to give you a tutorial. Um, Come to our advocacy day at the Capitol in Phoenix. Scan this QR code, you can register. It's March 23rd. So it's towards the tail end of session. We did that so that way we can ask our lawmakers why they voted the ways that they did on the vaccine bills and then hold them accountable. It's going to be great. We're partnering with the family physicians, we're partnering with the Arizona Medical Associations, school nurses, a bunch of other organizations. It'll be a great day. We talk to lawmakers, we have lunch. That's very fun. Find your local lawmaker. I'm assuming you know more about it. This is what we really need. We really need people to come to the Capitol and testify on a bill. I know that's a heavy ask. I know it's a big list of bills that are on the committee every day, but if you have the time, we really need you to come. There is almost never anybody there besides anti-vaccine activists and me. So we really need you guys to come. Here's my email. Here's my contact info. If you guys have any questions or comments, or you want more info about something, please reach out to me. But I will leave it on this page because I'm hoping you guys all come. I know it's a lot of
That's
information. I feel like I talked a lot, but hopefully that info was useful and I hope you enjoyed it.
It's all really, really good, somewhat infuriating information, but really well presented. And we appreciate this conversation so much. There's somebody in the chat here. Let me see if I can pull it all the way up. Let me close this. Hold on one second. All right. Vincent says, I'm a retired engineer and scientist who is a recent 7 years cancer survivor. I believe Ashley and I agree, right, Ashley? That the biggest
Yeah,
group of persuadable people are vaccine hesitant. All they need is
yeah,
an open ear and a gentle hint.
yeah,
The hard part is the gentle part, I think, even though empathy is toxic, according to some people, right? Like it is good to remember that they've been taken advantage of. I mean, I'm
yeah,
I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that I, for a hot second, had my own questions about vaccines. We talked about it before we started the webinar today, but it was actually somebody at my work, their child had spinal meningitis. And so that was enough for most of us there, I believe, to go ahead and get that full schedule in. Here's one coming from Ron. He says, how should we know when to come down to the Capitol or RTS to support you in this? I'm going to guess that if you do sign up for their email list, they'll be letting you know that. So
yes,
I signed up with my phone. So yeah.
yes. I will go
Um,
back to that page right here. We email you when we have anti-vaccine bills and you can sign in to RTS. And if you do not have an RTS account, if you email me, I can help you.
And there are lots of groups that do that for those
Yeah.
folks who are on the chat. It's great that your organization does it. We can also do it. I think Save Our Schools does it, Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. So if you don't have an RTS account, there's lots of different ways to get it. But unfortunately, you do have to, at least you or somebody by proxy, need to be able to register you at the Capitol for the first time.
And that's something our organizations and many organizations do for others. So any questions about that, let me know. We're always, there's always a long list of people that need help getting it activated at the Capitol, and we're happy to do that. One thing I
Mhm.
always like to say at the end of every presentation is if you're ever in a situation where you feel like you are, hitting your head up against the wall in terms of vaccine policy, that's okay. And you can always, this is what you can tell someone. And I've found that sometimes it helps diffuse the situation and hopefully it helps you guys. But I like to tell people, like, I understand, I respect your opinion. I know science is very complicated. One thing I just want to tell you is that vaccines are a victim of their own success. The reason that we don't see these deadly diseases and the reason that we are in this privileged opportunity where we feel like we don't have to get vaccines is because vaccines have been so successful. So,
Mhm.
just think about that. And I'm happy to talk to you about it at another time, but that's the reason. There's no other reason besides that.
It it's true. If people had a recent memory of
Yeah.
folks in iron lungs or, combating deadly diseases because they weren't vaccinated, we might all unfortunately be better off. But like, who wants to go back to iron
Yeah.
lungs?
Right.
So
And
it,
hopefully we never get there. I don't know, but at least we can all know that we tried our darndest, to speak our piece and get back there someday. I hope we don't ever get there.
yeah. Well, you, Ashley, are doing such important work, and I'm so grateful that Lindsay booked you for this, and that now everybody who comes to our Friday webinars can engage with your organization and roll their sleeves up and get to work.
Thank you guys so much for providing this forum to everybody. Your work is important, and it's important to uphold our constitutional values, both federally and state. So thank you guys for uh, standing up for one of the core principles that our nation was founded upon.
Right on. Thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you to everybody for being here. Next week, it is the recovering MAGA guy. So I hope to see you all there. And I hope that everybody has a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye bye.